Welcome to the Passive Income Podcast. I am your host, Dividend Dave. Please be sure to join the Passive Income Posse by clicking that subscribe button below. Go ahead, click it. Just click that subscribe button. Super excited for today's guest on this episode of the Passive Income Podcast. At Get Rich Brothers on Twitter, I'm going to throw it over to you, Ryan, to give yourself an introduction.
Thanks, Dave. First of all, thanks for having me on the podcast. I'm Ryan. I'm from Get Rich Brothers. I've been writing on that site since 2014. My brother and I set it up, and it's really gone from there. Mostly lately, it's been monthly updates, so passive income updates, dividend updates, that sort of thing. I've been investing. Yeah, exactly. It's all about the dividends. So I've been investing in dividend growth stocks, individual growth stocks since 2009. So just in the heart of the financial crisis. First stock I bought was TD, and really just been going since then.
Nice. So, and we will point out that you're also in Ontario, so a fellow Canadian. And before we started recording, you mentioned that you had a mixed portfolio. I mentioned we'll probably be talking, because we're both Canadian, we'll be talking about the Canadian market. But obviously, you said you had some U.S. stocks as well. So we'll just kind of see where the conversation takes us. That's sort of the way we roll here on the Passive Income Podcast. And
that works.
Yeah, let's just get into it, I guess. So you mentioned TD, so I guess let's start with the Canadian banks and go from there.
Sure. Yeah. So TD, first purchase I made, like I said, was 2009. And it was $50, split adjusted, around $24 cost basis. And I hadn't invested in them again since then until the pandemic. So March 2020, when everything completely tanked, right. I increased my position in TD by 150%. But until then, I'd just been taking the dividends, reinvesting them selectively into other companies, which is mostly what I do. I just let the dividends accumulate, selectively reinvest into other companies or back into stocks I already own. But TD, I was happy with the initial purchase price, like I said, in 2009, and there was nothing more to do with it. That's the beauty of dividend growth investing, right? You do make one-time good decision and then let the company do the heavy lifting from there.
Yeah, and you just sleep well and don't think about it again. You just every quarter say thank you for paying me to not work for you. I'm not a teller. I'm not. I don't work for Toronto Dominion Bank. I just collect a paycheck from you every 3 months.
Exactly. Yeah. So on the Canadian bank side, I have TD, I have CIBC, and I have Bank of Nova Scotia. So that's kind of my holdings. I don't want to add more at this point, just because it's already a large position in the portfolio.
Right.
But my plan is to just continue holding those really for the long term. The goal that I have with all of my dividend growth stocks is to honestly hold them the rest of my life. They can go on my will, and along the way, just to collect the dividends. At this point, because I'm still in the accumulation phase, I'm just reinvesting, like I said. But someday I'll start spending them, right?
Yeah, of course. That is the goal. Get to that retirement. Hopefully, sort of that financial independence, retire early, or even just financial independence, retire late, whatever you get to where you have that dividend income to help supplement your whatever other income you might have in retirement.
That's it. It's funny you say that. I always think about FIRE, and I mean that's one of the hottest topics, right, in all the whole personal finance space. And the concept of FIRE doesn't really interest me at all. Like the retire early, that whole thing. Financial independence is really what I'm after. Right. Retire early. I mean, main thing is kind of enjoy your day to day. Enjoy my job, enjoy my work, enjoy the people I work with, and the challenges and all that sort of thing. So the idea of retiring early isn't really what I'm after, but I think everybody's goal should be financial independence. Like regardless of what you want to do after work or whether you like your job or not, financial independence is something that should appeal to absolutely everyone. Because who doesn't want to be, personally, independent and able to have the autonomy to make decisions, not have to worry about money, not have to, stay up late with anxiety about how they're going to pay their bills, right?
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. Those are some great points. And I've had a lot of other guests, and it's not so much that you retire early or anything. It's becomes work optional, where you get to that age of 50, 55, 60, and you're not working because you have to. You're working because you want. I was even thinking this to myself, I was driving to Walmart the other morning, and I was like, you know what? Maybe when I'm 80 years old, I will just be a Walmart greeter, because that's something to get out and do for 2 or 3 days a week, right?
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's what gets missed so much, I think, is the social element too, right? So there's a person aspect to the whole thing. So that component, you're never going to get away from that. So even if you became financially independent, what are you going to do? Like do nothing, right? You're still going to have to go out in the world, whether you choose to volunteer, whether you choose to work part time, that sort of thing. The question should always be not just about getting yourself to that stage where you can retire, but also what are you retiring to? Like what's next? Most people are going to be only satisfied playing golf every day all the time to a certain extent, and then it's going to start feeling like work again, right? That's how
Yeah.
that's how our brains work. We always crave the thing that we don't have as much of, and usually that's personal enjoyment things that aren't work because we do so much of work. But when you flip that equation, you're going to get bored doing those things that you do that you right now enjoy on the weekends or whatever, right?
Yeah. So you mentioned your brother and this website. I'm going to pull it up here quickly.
Yeah, for sure.
So I guess one, where is your brother?
Yeah. So my brother hasn't written so much for the website since he had children. So he's been pretty busy over the last few years with that. The early articles on this website was probably split pretty evenly between the two of us. Lately, it's been mostly my personal updates. So I get the question sometimes is like, is there an actual brother, or are you saying that like you brothers should get rich? Like, so there's been that question. Originally it was, we're the Get Rich Brothers, and it still is. It's still, both of our site,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, he's not as present on the website anymore. My brother's Rick is his name, and but yeah, he's still investing, still a dividend growth investor, still following money, and we still have lots of talks about that, and yeah, so he's still present in my life. You just won't see him on the website as much.
Cool. So obviously, I will put the link in the description below to
For sure.
find that website.
Yeah, like I said,
And
it's
shout out
most.
to Rick. Thanks for watching this episode of the Passive Income Posse. You'd better
Yeah.
be watching it, by the way.
Oh yeah, he'll watch. He'll definitely watch. Yeah. Yeah, no, yeah, we have some overlap in our portfolios as well. Like, maybe some differences. Like, I think he's got like Royal Bank, but there is a lot of overlap. Like, we both have BNS. Same fundamental strategy between the portfolios. Yeah.
Out of curiosity, it doesn't make a difference one way or the other. Is Rick older or younger than you?
He's older. He's older. He's 3 years older than me. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So yeah, I'm trying to think who was really the inspiration for this. I guess going back to the early days, like pre 2009, I the way I got into personal finance was actually stumbling across some Kiyosaki books in chapters. So I was in Guelph, Ontario, and I was going through the bookstore, and there was this stand, and one of the books was like How to Get Rich or something like this. And I was like, oh, okay, it's like a small book, like 80 pages or something. So I was like, I'll flip through it. And at that point, I had no understanding of the stock market, no peers, nobody to talk to about this sort of thing. I just literally opened up a book that like was kind of flashy cover, and a small book. And I sat in the aisle and I read the whole book, and I was like, oh, this stuff's pretty cool. And
Yeah.
yeah, so that was like the first introduction from there. And then my brother and I got talking about it, and we started the first investing we really started to do in stocks was mutual funds and it was at TD Bank actually, where we banked. So we bought some mutual funds, and it didn't take very long as I started to continue reading, really, to be like, okay, well, mutual funds, why are they charging me 2.5%? I'm getting no advice for this. Like, I don't really know what's in my portfolio aside from, I guess, hundreds of different stocks. And like I said, I'm paying this high fee. Like, what's this
Yeah.
all
What
about?
am I paying for?
Yeah, what
Sort
am I
of.
paying for, right? And if you have even a small interest in the topic, you can probably pretty quickly realize, especially if you look through, like, say, the top Canadian ETFs, you're going to see the same companies. You're going to see CN Rail, you're going to see TD Bank, you're going to see like maybe Suncor or whatever. You're going to see a bunch of these top holdings. Like, well, okay, I can create my own portfolio, pay my, at that time it was $30 commission, but
Yep.
pay
I
one
remember
commission.
those days.
Right. Right. So at that point, pay your commission one time, and then it's like, okay, I can pay $30 one time and collect dividends for the next like 50 years and pay no fees from there. It's like, that sounds like a much better deal, right?
Right.
So then we quickly sold our mutual funds and then just started our individual investing journey. It was the same journey for both of us. Actually, funny thing was, when I first started, the money I used to buy my TD Bank stock was money I had in the guaranteed in GICs. And I had that money sitting there from when I was playing hockey, or no, when I was refereeing when I was younger. I just like accumulated some cash and that was just sitting there. When I went to the bank teller at TD to be like, oh, I want to cash this in, she was like, well, what are you going to do with the money? I was like, I'm going to buy TD bank stock. She's like, buying stocks, that's risky. Right? So
Like
it was
the
funny.
TD bank teller told you that buying TD bank
Yeah,
stocks was
yeah.
risky.
Yeah, she's like that's really buying stocks. That's risky. I'm like, well, I don't know. The dividend is pretty good right now, but anyway, we don't have to get into it. Long story short, I want my money. I need this money. I'm gonna buy TD Bank stock with it. Yeah, I mean,
That is amazing.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
funny. I there's a lot of words to describe that scenario, right?
right. And it's like it's just one of those things where I kind of love that as an investor because it's like they're trying to have you keep your money in like your investments, that sort of thing, as opposed to now as GICs, but still as opposed to like taking it out and doing something else out, right? Because one of the biggest mechanisms that a bank has to generate earnings is to have their frontline staff making referrals to their back end staff to take that money and put it in mutual funds, right? That's one of the goals,
Right.
and that's how they pay big dividends, right? But there's getting you to buy more products as well, like whether you take on loans or that sort of thing, take it in your
Mortgages and
credit card,
etc.
mortgages, credit cards, like all that sort of thing. So it's like that's what they educate their staff as well, right? The education isn't necessarily go buy individual stocks because if you're doing that, you're not generating very very many fees, right?
I just find that amazing that
Yeah.
the Toronto Dominion TD bank teller
Right.
wasn't sure about you
Yeah.
buying TD
Yeah,
stock, but
I told her what I was doing with it. Yeah, she was like, "Yeah, that's risky." I'm like, "Yeah, well." Yeah.
you're like, "So do you think your job is at risk?"
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, so it was a funny thing, a funny interaction. I'll never forget that because it was just like and again, I was still so early in the game also myself of learning what was risky, what wasn't risky.
Right.
So yeah. That
Cool.
was
Before we get any further into this, I am gonna give a shout out to Buy Investing Shirts, Dividends, Passive Income Posse merch. You're Canadian, so you know what I mean when I say a toque. I've been wearing this toque. It's extremely warm. You guys have seen me wear the Passive Income Posse t-shirt as well. There's Passive Income Posse hoodies. Um, Patrick has tons of great merch over there on Buy Investing Shirts, so I will put that link in the description as well. Use code word Posse for 5% off your purchase. Let's keep going and talk about sort of beyond the banks, I guess, sort of what else or what other sectors maybe did you get into next after that?
Yeah, so I try to focus on I try to avoid cyclical industries as much as possible. So like I try to stay away from things that are like whether it's car manufacturers, that sort of thing. I try to stay away from even like oil. I don't like commodity based assets too much. So I have like I said, I mentioned earlier, CN Rail. I've got the banks. I've got the telecom. So I've got all three of them. I got like BCE. I got TELUS, Rogers. I have some Metro is another one I have like on the grocer side. I have
Yep.
Saputo, so some kind of discretionary, non-discretionary. A lot of on that side. On the U.S. side, I have like Coca-Cola. I have some Berkshire Hathaway. I'm a big fan of Warren Buffett. So I have Johnson and Johnson. I'm trying to think through some of the Apple, Microsoft, Visa, MasterCard. I'm not big on like trying to pick one winner. I think in a lot of these sectors, there's the opportunity to own both. So like I said, CN Rail, I have CP Rail as well. We're
Right.
just closing their deal with Kansas City Southern, which is should be a good deal. Yeah, so all kinds across many different sectors. Not too many speculative names. I do have like Coinbase, so that's a more speculative one. That's like the crypto exchange.
Right.
But I don't go too deep into speculative names. Like I said, mostly when you're talking about dividend growth stocks, you're already filtering yourself down to higher quality companies because you're talking in most cases about a company that is earning enough money that it can send cash to shareholders, especially if it has a long track record of dividend growth. It's sending cash to shareholders and being able to fund its future expansion, right? So you're already looking at a smaller subset of higher quality companies. I also have RioCan, so Real Estate Investment Trust, obviously the big one in Canada. So
Hey, everybody that watches the Passive Income podcast knows I love my RioCan.
yeah, that was actually that was my second stock, the second company I ever bought. But TD, I still remember it was back in it was August 2009. I bought my RioCan and. I reinvested the dividend, the distribution for a while, but right now I'm just collecting it and, like I said, selectively reinvesting elsewhere.
Nice, nice.
Yeah, their dividend cut, a few years back was pretty brutal, but
Yep,
anyway, they've started increasing again, right? The
yep.
payment,
Actually, just last month,
March,
or
yeah, the March payment was like up 6.25%, something like that.
yeah, well,
Yeah,
basically it went from 8.5 cents per share up to 9, which I was happy with. I'm like,
yeah,
you just gave me a raise. I did not have to go in and
yeah,
not and talk to my boss and say why I deserved a raise. You just gave
yeah,
it to me. I didn't
yeah.
I didn't do anything. I don't even work for you, and you gave me a raise.
Yeah, well, it's funny because one of the things I always talk about is like, double dipping, but like trying to think in my head, like what's the biggest amount of double dipping I can do? So that's like someone buying like a Coca-Cola with their Visa credit card inside of a McDonald's that's inside of a Walmart that's leased by RioCan. You know what I mean? I think of like, oh, I'm gonna a share of everything from that purchase, right?
Right. Wow, that's
Yeah,
quite a that's
yeah.
that's some deep thinking.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I like to think when I see it happen, it's just like that's the sweet spot. Right? Yeah.
Yeah, so what I talk about a lot too is the Ryokan Center in Kingston because that's the property I'm most familiar with. Like it's just
Right.
down the road from me.
Hmm.
Um, I grew up in Kingston. I'm familiar that actually that property was an old Nortel property, and then we
Okay.
all know what happened to Nortel back
Yeah.
in the late '90s, early 2000s. Nortel
Yeah.
was like the
Yeah.
darling of Canadian investing, and
Yeah.
then all of a sudden it wasn't.
Hmm.
And so that it was a huge property in Kingston, and Ryokan came in, bought the property, developed it, and now, like, I don't know if you're familiar with that property in Kingston, but, there's Home Depot and Scotiabank and TD Bank and
Sure. I've been there.
restaurant chains and Cineplex and retail
Yeah.
stores, obviously, and Best Buy,
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
just walk around that, it's probably the size of 3, maybe 4 football fields, and it's just this huge retail complex,
Yeah.
and it's just amazing, and similar to what you're saying is like, "Oh, okay, well," and, the sub one, Firehouse Subs,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is in one of my ETFs, and I'm like, "Oh,
Yeah.
wow, okay," like, Scotiabank, TD Bank, and
Yeah.
Home Depot, and it's like, I don't own shares of Home Depot individually, but it's like, "Hey, you know what?
Yeah.
I've got that Ryokan share, and it's right there,"
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
they're just amazing properties to look at, and like I said, I just talk about the one in Kingston a lot because that's the one I'm most familiar with.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. It's nice when you see your companies that are out in the world doing things. Like I didn't mention them, but like Waste Management is another one. One of my best stocks I've owned actually since 2011. Bought them, and again, just been collecting the dividends. I actually sold a put option on them back at that time as well, and I made I'm trying to think, made a few $100s from that. In hindsight, I should have just bought the shares straight up because this shares have done so well since then. I don't know, 300 to 400% gain, right? But yeah, it's great when you see them out there doing the work. We have Ryokan Plaza in Cornwall as well, where I'm from, and yeah, like I said, I always look out to see the companies, and
yeah.
you can kind of get a feel for the pulse, like. Peter Lynch, right, from the Magellan Fund. Peter Lynch won up on Wall Street, that sort of thing. One of his big points from the book is just that us on the street, on the ground, right, have actually a better lens into how companies are doing than a Wall Street analyst, right? Wall Street analysts are living in downtown New York City or something like this, and they're looking at financial statements, but we're
They're
able to
looking at
actually,
numbers on a screen.
yeah, exactly,
And we're looking at people
yeah,
actually out there doing things, like that
word
garbage
of
truck
mouth,
driver of Waste
yeah,
Management
yeah, yeah,
or
exactly,
the drive-through person at McDonald's or
yeah,
the sales associate, again, going back to Home Depot or
yep,
wherever or the bank teller at TD.
yeah,
We're interacting with the people
yeah,
who are making these companies happen, right? Like, these
yeah,
companies are,
yeah.
human resources is the number one asset of any company, obviously, right?
100%. It's the only thing, the only way you could differentiate most companies why they're successful, right? A lot, like, they're, especially in like the technological age, most companies have access to the same resources, but the decisions that are made by the people working there is what makes the difference, right? So that's why the importance of like a good management team, especially like a long-standing one that's been around for a long time, is super important. And again, as far as like the Wall Street edge, I mean, look at what we have now. We have access to like up to the second stock quotes if you're interested in that. I'm not interested in day trading. Couldn't be bothered to check like the minute by minute. But
Yeah.
if you wanted to, you could. All that sort of data analytics you can have access to. For myself, most companies, like my cycle of like researching that sort of thing is most of these companies, a lot of these companies have been following for like over 10 years now, like from an investment angle. So I don't need to like relearn what TD Bank is doing every quarter, right? But I can go through and check the changes. Like, what's the change? Read through at least the transcript, some of the transcript from the quarterly call, stuff like that, just to kind of stay current on what's going on with the company. Are they making progress on their goals? Are they not? That sort of thing. When you get to that point, it's a lot less maintenance. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. I do want to circle back to
Yeah.
trains, CNR and CP. I don't know if you've seen my tweets
Yeah.
recently, but right outside that window,
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to start tagging you in
Yeah.
those tweets. Yeah, train goes by quite
Yeah.
often
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. No, that's one of my. Before, I'll put it this way: before I owned rail stocks, I used to hate waiting at crossings, but now I love it because I just see what I see. I see which company of mine is going by. I like to see which actual rail cars they have, and yeah, what's being shipped from port to port is always really cool now, right?
And even that's another one where you can be watching those rail cars go by, and sometimes the rail cars are gonna
Yep.
say like
Yep.
Walmart or whatever on them, or Canadian
Yep.
Tires. There's a lot
Mhm.
of Canadian Tire containers on those rail cars
Yep.
out there. Like Canadian Tire, that's a company we don't talk about very
Yep.
often here on the Passive Income
Yeah.
podcast. But
It's one I don't own.
let me get your thoughts on that
It's one I
company.
don't own. It's one I have thought about many times. I haven't checked it in a while. The yield is pretty low, right? Like it's under 2% maybe, the yield.
Yeah, I honestly I haven't checked it in a
Yeah.
while either, but I
The
would just
growth is pretty.
that seems
Yeah,
right.
I think the
That
growth
seems
is pretty
reasonable.
good. I mean, I like the store, and when it comes wintertime, if I need to like pick up another ice scraper or something like that, like Canadian Tire is pretty much my go-to for that sort of thing. Actually, that's what I did this winter. And,
Yeah,
so
I did it last winter. Ice scraper.
yeah,
Yep.
well, that's the thing. Mine, I had it for like 10 years, and finally I found it was kind of losing its edge. So I was like, okay, it's now's the time. So yeah, anyway, that sort of thing. So there's certain things that I will go to Canadian Tire for, and just in general, I think that it has pretty high brand loyalty. Like I think people who shop there like going there. And then they
Yeah,
have
for
others, right?
sure.
So like Mark's Work Warehouse, I think is under them as well. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yep,
Yeah. So it has a lot
they
of
are.
like good brands, because that's another place if I want like high quality clothes, like some new clothes, like boots or something like that. Mark's Work Warehouse is a place I'll go to.
Yeah, they definitely have the good quality work gear like your Carhartts and the higher
Yeah.
quality,
Yeah. Yes.
you know, and even just some half decent. I don't want to call it
Yeah.
dress. Well, dress dress clothing for us
Right.
farmers, I guess. Right.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. And then, and like I said, Canadian Tire as well. Like, I coach my nephew's hockey as well, and so when I hadn't been on ice skates in years, man. So I finally, anyway, a few years back, I went. It was Canadian Tire that I bought my skates, and I didn't even shop around or anything, right? I was just like, okay, I'll go to Canadian Tire, pick up my skates. So
Yeah, because
yeah,
you just know, Canadian Tire has like a huge selection of
yep,
sporting goods, and they are
yep,
basically any kid who has played hockey in Canada has
yep,
bought something from, or their parents have bought something from Canadian
yep,
Tire, whether it's skates or a stick or gloves or a
yep,
helmet.
yep,
You can
yeah,
guarantee. Now I'm gonna age myself here, like, my sticks my sticks from Canadian Tire cost, like, between 8 and
yeah, yeah.
$12 back in the day when they were made out of
Yeah, yeah.
wood.
So it's hard to get under $100 these days for a stick type thing. Yeah, even for my nephew, I think I got him a new stick, and I'm trying to think, it might have been like 119 bucks or something. But what are you gonna do?
Wow, and these days, those are, like, the less
Yeah,
expensive
yeah.
ones,
It,
'cause I
it
know
wasn't even one of the high
they
end
got
sticks.
ridiculously
Yeah, it
expensive.
wasn't even high. I mean, it was nice, and it's definitely going to meet his needs as like an 8-year old. But like, like, but still, yeah, it's not cheap. Um,
Wow, wow, that's
yeah,
amazing. So definitely Canadian Tire is another store that I really do wanna talk more about here on the Passive Income podcast with other guests, and I'm sure we will in the future. You also mentioned, the telecoms, Bell, Telus, and
yeah.
Rogers. You wanna just maybe dive a little deeper into
Sure.
that?
Yeah. So Bell, I've been with them since it might have been 2011, I think, the first purchase, and maybe again in 2013, something like that. Obviously, the nice thing about, it's funny. There's like a tale of three stocks there, right? So Bell Canada, they're like the big one. They have a solid dividend yield. You're going to get about 5% annual growth, which is decent when you're already talking about a high yield. TELUS, what I love about TELUS, it's like one of the few companies, like I have Fortis as well, and I love companies that have a transparent dividend policy. So TELUS will project out several years. I'm trying to think what year they're projected to now, but of having 7 to 10% annual dividend growth, right? So it's nice when you can be like, okay, I'm going to start with a yield of like 4.5%. They're telling me that even on the low end, I'm going to get 7% a yield a year growth, and you can kind of see where you're going. And I find it's great for shareholders when you have that from management. And then on the other side, Rogers. There hasn't been growth in years. You know what I mean? Like, so it's like the
Yeah.
dividend yield's like, okay, you have no growth. Share appreciation has been okay, but I wouldn't add any more. If I'm adding to a telecom at this point, for myself anyway, it's TELUS. Just because even if the yield's a little bit lower than BCE, I like the growth. I also like that they're invested into other things as well, right? So they're not just like a straight telecom. There's also like the TELUS Health component. So they have like some electronic medical record, aspects to what they have, to their offerings. And just in general, actually, there's always regulatory talk as well, like governments wanting to like split them up or regulate them more heavily, this sort of thing. And I mean, I think it's important nationally to have strong banks, have strong telecoms, and even if as a consumer that means sometimes I'm paying a little bit more, I'd rather that than a really fragmented operating environment where the companies are like undercutting each other and like going out of business and struggling. There are certain places I think that nationally we're better off. We
We
benefit.
benefit
Yeah,
from.
I mean, look what's happening in the U.S. right now with the banks, right? You know,
Do I have to?
right. So it's like I think of them very similar. Like we have like a big oligopoly in Canada where you have a few major players, and when I compare that to the regional bank situation right now in the U.S., Silicon Valley Bank going under, and then just the contagion. I mean, even like Credit Suisse having to
Yeah.
be acquired by UBS. I don't want that to happen to even the banks I don't own. I don't want that to happen to Bank of Montreal or whatever, right? I want us to have a strong banking system, and fees are a little bit higher, and I think that's just the cost of doing business. It's like, do you want a stable sector where the banks are able to be regulated like utilities and make a good amount of money? And if you want, buy some shares and benefit from it, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think my perspective in general on big companies is it's, rather than kind of fighting against the machine, it's like you can benefit from it too, on a personal level. Just own some shares, and in general, also there's a big philanthropic side of that as well, right? We benefit as a society by having like Bell Let's Talk Day and different things like this, that if those big
Yeah.
companies didn't exist, that money just wouldn't exist, right? That's being sent to these initiatives, to communities, I mean, look at like Tim Hortons and whatever, and their sponsorship of Timbits hockey, right? So
Yeah.
there's, a lot of people are like anti-capitalism or anti big business, but big business does a lot to serve back to our communities as well. So I think that's an important thing that doesn't always get messaged. It's easy to be mad about big bankers or big whatever, but yeah, you got to take sometimes what you don't like with all the good side, right?
Yeah, for those who don't know, Bell Let's Talk Day is a day dedicated to talking about mental health, and it happens once a year in Canada. Around the middle to end of February, I believe, or maybe end of January,
Yeah,
sometime in those cold
I
winter
should know
months,
this, but
which
yeah,
is
somewhere around
probably a
there.
really good time to be talking about mental
Yeah,
health.
somewhere around there. Yeah,
And I believe at one point they were like donating 5 cents for every text that had the
yeah,
hashtag Let's Talk. I'm not sure if that's still a thing. Maybe it is.
yeah.
So on that day,
Mhm.
obviously, but yeah. So the Bell Let's Talk Day is. I agree with you. It's one of those fantastic initiatives that a big company is able to
Yeah,
do, and it's just amazing. I agree with
yeah,
you on that one. I also I guess, wanted to mention Bell Media as
mhm,
well. You were talking about,
yeah,
TELUS sort of branching
mhm,
out, and Bell Media is a huge component of that
mhm,
company, of the parent company being Bell, obviously, but Bell
yeah.
Media, now owning so many different television stations and media companies
TSN,
that,
yeah,
yeah, TSN. I think they own Much Music and and who
yeah,
knows what else.
yeah.
Um, Sticking with telecoms, Rogers and Shaw, and what are your thoughts on that
um,
merger acquisition? I guess it's more of an acquisition than a
Yeah,
merger.
yeah. I followed it. I'm not up to the minute on where things are at with that, but I was following it along, and interestingly, when that happened, when that was going on, right, there was the whole Rogers outage that like impacted. Remember, like the right? And I remember as soon as I heard about the outage that you couldn't use your debit machines and so on and so forth if you were using this network. I was thinking this is going to massively hurt that merger, because one of the selling points is if they bring them in, then we have again stronger telecom network and that sort of thing. But it's like, if this is the impact of having one of the big three go out, imagine if the big three were even bigger, right? How much bigger of an impact could this be? So in general, my philosophy on mergers and acquisitions is I like to be quick and painless. I don't like it when it has to drag on for years and be go through the antitrust wheelhouse and for forever.
Right.
Like, I mean, CP in Kansas City Southern on the rail side kind of had this where it went on for a while, and there was the whole competitive bidding with CN Rail when they were involved in it. And as long as you can avoid like a bidding war, because bidding wars are horrible for the acquiring companies, right? The price is just getting pushed up endlessly, and it doesn't really even benefit the company that's being acquired in a lot of cases if it doesn't wind up happening, because the share price just goes, like for long-term shareholders anyway, and it just goes back down after the fact, and sometimes gets even penalized even more. So I mean, in general, I'd be in favor of something. And you just remind me, is it still going on? I kind of stopped following. It's
Oh
still going,
yeah,
yeah.
I haven't seen any closure to
Yeah.
it as of recording
Yeah,
today.
I hadn't seen anything either. So I don't know. I just hope they come to a resolution or cut their losses at some point. Because again, you're talking about a company that hasn't increased its dividend in forever, and it's like now their money's now being diverted and has to be kind of put on hold for this merger. So they're going to sink millions and millions and millions into this. So one way or the other, I'd rather it sooner than later. No strong sentiment that like I hope they get them. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You reminded me of that Rogers outage. Honestly, I'd forgotten
Yeah.
about it, but that day I did see like one of the like that tweet won Twitter that day, because I'm sure it must have been a younger
Yeah.
person, and they were like, Top Gun is the number one movie, Metallica has the number one song, there is no internet or interact. This is the closest I'm ever going to be to
Right.
1985.
Yeah, well, that's exactly it, right? It's that was crazy. They were yeah, there were some people I was talking to like personally who like needed to get some money out, and it was just like this whole it was just chaos. Like, yeah. Uh, but and that's when I think about like, again, talking about like the infrastructure of like the country, if you're talking about telecoms or banks or whatever, the next big like threat to like our like modern societies for sure is like some sort of a cyber. We really haven't had something yet that's going to be massive and impactful like that. I mean, that's just an outage, but like
That was just one, and that was just one
just
day.
one
Could
day.
you imagine if that had to happen for like
Yeah.
30 days or
Yep.
something, or even 10
Imagine that.
days?
Imagine that, right? Because I mean, most people these days barely keep any cash at home. It's like they use their debit cards, their credit card type thing. Everything's digital. It's like, yeah,
Yeah, I very seldom even have a
yeah,
$5 bill or $10 bill
yeah,
in my
yeah,
wallet,
exactly.
because like, why would I pay for everything with
Yeah,
debit. I try not to use my Visa. When I do use my Visa, I pay it off as quickly as
yeah,
possible. But so yeah, very rarely do you actually have cash in your wallet
yeah,
anymore, right?
yeah. Try to keep like 20 bucks in my truck just in case something like this or whatever, right?
Yeah, yeah, because you never
Yeah,
know, I
that's
guess,
it.
right? Just quick shout out to Buy Me a Coffee. Please help support the Passive Income Podcast by buying me a coffee. Link in the description below, or use the QR code on your screen. Let's keep going. And so we've talked about RioCan, but any other REITs in your
Yep. So
portfolio?
I have Chartwell retirement residences. Yeah, so I've got them, and I have A&W. So A&W is my other REIT. I mean, it's a restaurant, but it's a REIT. The structure of it, right? And
Yep.
they've been pretty good. They had to cut their distribution during the depths of the pandemic, and then but since then they've paid back what they basically owed to unit holders, and that's the only three that I have. I'm trying to think. I've considered adding more. What's nice about REITs, obviously, is when you can get that monthly income. Like just that monthly payment is
Yes.
super nice to balance things out. Because if you've been through my website and my regular updates, February, that February payment schedule, quarterly schedule. So like February, May, August, November, those are my lowest months by like hundreds of dollars, like significantly lower. And then so like the rest of the months are good. But if you're trying to balance that out and like say you were living on dividends type thing, you'd have like a few really good months, and then you'd have these really lean months where you better have put some money aside for. So like the
Yeah.
monthly income can really balance things out if you're thinking about like a retiree or anyone. It's nicer to have it leveled out. So that's definitely something that's attractive. There's also like difference in tax treatment, right? So it's better if you have something like that to have it in your TFSA or something like in a registered account.
So for those who don't know, Chartwell is they invest or they have in their retirement facilities, long-term care and
Yeah.
seniors homes. And I don't own any yet, but I've always joked I need to buy some before I need to move in
Yeah,
there.
right. Yeah, no, I mean, I think in general, the sector, like long-term care, I mean, it's obvious that that's just going to continue increasing and increasing. The populations are getting older.
Yeah.
Families in general, it's not like most people don't want their older relatives necessarily moving in with them, so you need to have somewhere for them to stay and like to be cared for and that sort of thing. So it's a good thing, and like I said, the needs just going to continue to expand. So even a company that does moderately well or performs moderately well, or with their facilities, should be able to do an okay job over time. But they haven't had too much growth either in their distribution. So again, I'm just taking it and reinvest elsewhere at
Yeah.
this point. Um,
I do have EXE, which is similar that they have some of the those long-term care and seniors home type facilities in their REIT. I also have Northwest Healthcare, which obviously is more healthcare related, like owning the physical properties of the doctor's offices and
but
the medical clinics and probably dental offices and who
yeah,
knows what else. I am fearing a dividend cut in Northwest Healthcare. Any thoughts on that?
I can't say I know them well enough to comment specifically on that company. I mean, one of the main things, right? What's their payout ratio, um, and I don't know their business prospects, but yeah, do you know what their ratio is offhand? Because I mean, usually,
Not off
yeah,
the top of my head. No, I don't.
yeah, that's usually like one of the main things, right? Another REIT that I don't own is Pizza Pizza. Do you happen to have any of that?
I
Yeah,
love pizza.
yeah,
As a consumer, I'm probably gonna go to Pizza Hut first to buy my pizza, but you know what? Every month, Pizza keeps sending
yeah,
me
yeah.
mo keeps paying me to not
Yeah,
work
yeah,
for
there you
them.
go. I mean, yeah, and that's the thing. Like on the food side, I'm that's also another one of the sectors I like. So I have McDonald's, I have Yum Brands. So the KFC, Taco Bell, Pizza Hut is part of that, right? And
Yep,
and actually both of those I bought. If you remember, I think it was 2014. There was a meat supplier scandal in China where like one of the packaging facilities that was handling the meat was like there were all kinds of like, I think they were like putting expired meat and then continuing to process that and all that. Yeah, so there were all these problems,
right.
and I remember at McDonald's and Yum Brands both got punished by that from that, and I remember looking at the situation and just being like, what does this have to do with their long-term business model? Like literally nothing, right? They're gonna switch. They're either going to A, rectify the problem with their current supplier, or they're B, going to switch suppliers. I mean, these are big companies with tons of scale, and I'm confident they have something in their contract or some way of getting out of a situation where the company they're working with, the supplier, isn't doing their job properly. So anyway, at that time, I bought this. I bought both stocks at that time, and then the shares continued to go down, and I just bought more again, and then I haven't bought it any since. I just still own the shares that I owned from back then. Yum Brands split into two companies, Yum China and Yum proper for like the rest of the world, but that's the sort of situation I'm always on the lookout for as well. I mean, that's same thing with Johnson and Johnson. So when I bought my J&J, that was they were having a problem, and again, I think this is like 2011. They were having a problem at their McNeil facility in I think Puerto Rico with Tylenol, and same thing. I looked at it, I'm like, what's this have to do with Johnson and Johnson's long-term business prospects? Like, if they're having a problem
Right.
with their supplier, they can replace that. If they're having a problem with management who's not like taking care of the problems, they can deal with that too. So, but you're talking about a company with like tens of billions of dollars in revenue across many product lines, and Tylenol just happens to be like their flagship brand, like one of their many flagship brands, right?
And in these companies, you're definitely looking at the scale going, these companies are
Yeah,
massive, and this is news
yeah,
today, and, 3 months, 6 months down the road, this is gonna be old news, and nobody's gonna
yeah,
remember it,
yeah,
and
yeah,
they're just gonna
yeah,
move
yeah,
on,
exactly.
and that's obviously what they've
Yeah,
done, nearly 10 years later from 2013,
yeah,
2014, both J&J, McDonald's, and
yeah,
whoever else you
yeah.
mentioned there, they've moved
Well,
on,
that's it.
right?
You're
Like
you always look to say, is the problem systemic? That'd be different from like, oh, they're having like a financial accounting scandal. Well, that's a different topic, right? Because who knows how deep that river runs, that sort of thing. And there's always going to be things like right now with the talc powder with Johnson and Johnson, and did they
Yep.
know about this? How long did they know? What's going to be the litigation? What's going to be the situation on that? You always have to balance that and be like, okay, is this going to sink the company, or are they going to ultimately pay a fine and go on with their day? And I mean, obviously, it's unfortunate. It's what's happened to anybody if this proves to be true, that they knew for how long and so on and so forth. But as far as the business is concerned, my main focus is usually on like, is this systemic? Like, is there like a serious underlying problem here with the company that cannot be resolved? Because when you talk with them, again, you're talking about billions of dollars. They have tons of access to liquidity, to financing. Um, and again, if you're talking about like Johnson and Johnson, you're talking about a dividend king, right? Company with over 50 years of dividend growth consecutive, like longer than I've been alive. They've been sending increased money, checks to their shareholders.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and they're going to probably keep going. While we're on the topic of sort of the, foods and restaurants, and you did mention Tim Hortons earlier. So, any thoughts on QSR and Restaurant Brands
Yep. I
International?
don't have any QSR. I've watched them for a long time. Actually, yeah, so it's, I think, a good company as well. If I didn't have already like a large exposure, say to like large enough anyway for my portfolio to McDonald's and Yum Brands, and like I said, A&W, I'd probably add QSR. Maybe I'll do it anyway just to kind of round things out. So I wouldn't be
Right.
surprised if I did. But yeah, I think it's a good company as well. Again, lower dividend yield, which is one of the reasons it doesn't really attract me so much, because when I look at the competitive market, they're competing with like Goliaths, right? So like the Burger King is heads up, going straight up against McDonald's and A&W and any other Wendy's, right? I don't have any Wendy's either, but yeah. So there's a lot of big amounts of competition there that I don't see anyone really gaining a competitive edge. Like I don't think they'll get a competitive edge over.
Yeah, and it's tough. Like
It's
Starbucks or Tim Hortons
Yep,
is going directly
same
against
thing.
Starbucks, and it can be argued that they're well, they not argued. They definitely are two very different types of coffee
For sure.
shops, but at the end of the day, they are
Yep.
both coffee shops selling you donuts and muffins as
Yeah, so
well, right?
there's a lot of big companies that with like global massive scale. Again, probably a similar situation where I think there's no need to necessarily pick a winner. You could probably own a few different ones. It's just when I look also, I mean, as you know, like there's opportunity cost, right? So it's like if say you have $1,000, it's like where are you going to invest it? And if you think about
Yeah.
like Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett, they're going to be like, you should always be investing in like your number one investment. So it's not just picking say QSR against McDonald's, it's picking QSR against, I don't know, Microsoft or whatever. It's and wherever you might allocate those dollars in the context of your portfolio. So right now, thinking about mine, I have all the exposure I need within the the restaurant sector. And so if I was going to invest right now, I'm really following a lot of this like artificial intelligence stuff, like Chat GPT and Bard with Google. I think that's definitely the future. And again, probably there's going to be many winners. And I've been over the course of the past maybe 3 years, I guess, focusing more 3, 4 years, maybe focusing more on tech related investments. So just because I didn't have as much of my portfolio, it's more like Canadian based. And as you know, we don't have a whole lot of like high flying tech companies. Not
Not
anymore.
anymore. Like, we
Research in
used to
motion.
have
Yeah,
BlackBerry and Corel, but where are those
that's
companies now,
exactly
right?
it. Yeah, so like we don't have that in Canada. So like I'd been focused on the Canadian environment mainly, like for the most part. And anyway, lately I've just been like, okay, well I have to have some tech in the portfolio, because no matter how you do business, like even think about CN Rail, I was
Tech is
it's
the
a future.
future.
It's a future. Like I was.
And in every
Yep.
sector. Like, I've had other guests where we talk about, how John Deere and Caterpillar
Yep.
can be considered tech companies, because look inside the cab of a brand
Yep.
new John Deere
Yeah, yeah. I
tractor.
mean, these guys are actually impacted by like chip shortages type thing, right? It's crazy, but like
Yeah.
that's the level of sophistication of the tech. And so if you think of like a CN Rail, I was reading in their quarterly report a while ago, maybe a year ago, about their partnership with Google. So they have these spots where their trains are going along the rail, and it's completely wrapped around. And as the train car goes through, the sensors are picking up everything on the train as far as like how the brakes are worn and so on and so forth. And they're working on this AI machine learning that will not just identify the problems, but also put in the service ticket, and it'll, as the train's coming in, it, like, computers will and machines will be taking like that rail car and taking it off, and like for maintenance and so on and so forth.
At the rail
Yeah.
yard saying, "Okay, car
Yep.
number 15
Yep.
or 25 or
Yep.
62 or whatever, this car has to go over there, and we need to check the
Yep.
brakes. There must
Yeah.
be brakes on a rail car. I
Yeah.
don't know enough about how a
Everything to
train
do with it,
actually
right? And so
operates."
it'll identify that, and it'll send it off, and they'll, for repairs and so on and so forth, all without. And think about how, the velocity of rail cars, and the turnaround time to get that car back on the yard, and shipping again, so much lower than a human. To do this, you need to get the cars parked, right? You need to get a human being underneath to go look at it. Hopefully they haven't called in sick that day, and so on and so, right, so on and so forth.
Again, going back to the human
Yep.
resources, right? At the end of the day, you
Yep.
still need
Yep.
that human body there to
Yep.
do
Yep. Yep.
whatever, task or chore that
Yep.
needs to
Yeah,
be
exactly. And
accomplished.
so if you can automate some of this, if you can take it and kind of learn from that, also like route management. So like CN Rail, like in the past, like just picture like someone sitting at headquarters, kind of like trying to map out where, when it goes from here to here, then from here to here. But
Yeah.
computers deal with,
Okay, we've got a train that leaves
yep.
Vancouver and is gonna stop in Calgary, and it's gonna stop
Mhm.
in Regina, it's gonna stop in
Yeah.
Winnipeg, and then it's gotta go all through Ontario and to the
Mhm.
east, and then we get to Halifax, and we've gotta turn it around and send it back to
Yeah, so you
Vancouver.
think about the machine learning, AI, these sorts of tasks are tailor made for it, and we're just like on the tip of the iceberg for how efficient like a rail company can be, right? And then
Right.
you think of like the broader impacts to like any company shipping with them, and so on and so forth. Like we're probably like not even half as efficient as we will be in like 10 years. It's crazy, but think of how much waste is probably in there just because it hasn't been picked up by human minds, but it will be picked up by machine learning, right?
Well, yeah, and definitely, like, I'm not sure how old you are, but,
36.
you've made a few references to a few things that I'm obviously familiar with,
Yeah.
but just where we've come in the last 10 and 20 years, and then to think where we're gonna be in another 10 years, like, the last 10 years, you mentioned about, buying, online banking
Yeah.
and paying
Yeah.
$30
It's insane.
for a
Yeah.
share, for a trade, and now it's, basically free
Yep.
commission, so just sort of that's one minor example, but, where we've come in the last 10, 15, 20 years, and, I agree with you 100%. Where are we gonna be in another
Yeah.
10 or 20 years with this AI and this learning technology? And, I
Yeah.
the
Mhm.
opportunities are endless,
Yeah,
right?
I only really became a believer in AI. Well, I mean, I've always known it was coming, but a believer that like we're pretty much there, with OpenAI and ChatGPT at the end of last year and into this year. I've been playing with it a little bit,
Yeah,
experimenting with, okay, how can I use this to make myself more efficient as a writer? How can I make myself more like, say for developing content for Twitter type thing? Like just kind of like playing around with that, asking it questions. What are 15 top what are 50 topics of dividend growth investing, stuff like that, just to kind of like see what it sends back. I don't have any intention of using it to like write articles or anything like that, because like the reason my brother and I started Get Rich Brothers was because we like write we love personal finance, we enjoy writing articles, and it was like I don't want AI to like develop my articles. That's like the enjoyment for me, is like to write something, to have it personalized, to have a discussion with people who comment on the article. Like that's part of the fun, right? So like I write on Seeking Alpha as well, and like
yeah,
and
for
like one of
sure.
the most important enjoyable things is commenting with people, getting their perspective on what they think about what you wrote. Replacing that with AI doesn't interest me whatsoever. But I do. There are a lot of like menial tasks that I think, like just thinking about in the workplace, that I can think it could be replaced with AI. That would be awesome. So like say you develop some content, you've got this report that you wrote for work. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to drop that into Chat GPT and say, or say, create me a PowerPoint presentation of 15 slides on this, develop me an executive summary on this. Like you've already done the work, now just do some of these like, additional tasks that you wind up having to do, like within the workplace. Like I can just think of endless amounts of ways that this can be beneficial, for an organization. Like how efficient is that, rather than me spending, going and spending hours and hours on that PowerPoint deck. Let it do it, right? I'll give it a template, build it
Right.
based on this. Put a meme slide on like slides 7 and like 13 to make the audience laugh. It's like whatever. Right?
Yeah, 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 yeah. And I guess the question is, how do we invest in Chat
Well,
GPT?
yeah, right. So ChatGPT is OpenAI is the company, right? And Microsoft just announced like a major partnership with, like, they initially had like $1 billion invested, and I think now they've committed another like $10 billion to the company. At some point, they'll own 49%. There will be 2% retained by the company, and then there's another 49%. I forget, will be owned by somebody else. But Microsoft is one. Is if you're talking about
Yeah, basically the play right now is if you want to have a piece of the AI is
Microsoft for
Microsoft.
ChatGPT, and then Google just announced, and I haven't even unpacked it yet. I think they announced this today. I still need to do some reading about Bard, which is their AI
Right.
tool, and I think it should be live right now, even with search. Like I said, I haven't fully read through that yet, but Google's another major player on the AI side, and everybody's coming out with something. Like I was reading through the Oracle call as well the other day, and I mean, Oracle was talking about, how they've had AI integrated for years now within their database solutions. But the real mainstream, the really like flashy thing right now is ChatGPT, and like how this can work with search engines. I liked actually what Microsoft, like Satya Nadella, the CEO, like he was talking through about how they're calling this your co-pilot for the web. So like Bing and Edge, and like having this co-pilot little thing on the side panel where I can just like tell it to like do something for me, like book me a trip, to Mexico for 5 days with, like, you know.
That just reminded me of the paperclip. Do
Yeah,
you remember the
yeah. What
paperclip?
was what was his name? What was the name of the paperclip? Yeah,
Oh, I can't
yeah,
remember that,
yeah, yeah.
but
Yeah, that's exactly it. So this is supposed to be like the promise of the paperclip, but like actually
yeah, the paperclip on
paperclip on
steroids.
steroids. Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
A couple quick questions before we
Sure.
sign off. Just wondering, sort of a percentage breakdown of your Canadian versus US. Is it like 60-40,
Yeah.
70
Yeah, I'd have
30?
to look that up now. It's probably something like 60-40. Could also be 50-50, to tell you the truth. Um,
Right.
Another place that I didn't mention that I've been investing, like kind of focusing over the past year, 2 years, few years anyway, is Brookfield. So Brookfield Infrastructure, Brookfield Renewable, also BAM proper, right? And so
Yep.
that whole Brookfield infrastructure, I find like so fascinating, just because they seem like they have this asset management company, and they actually just split that up into two companies. But they've got this big asset management company that has tons of resources, like tons of access to capital, and then you have these smaller companies that are affiliated to it, that if they need money, so if Brookfield Renewable has some, I don't know, like, whatever project they want to work on, or some solar thing that they're doing, they can tap the capital from Brookfield Asset Management. So they've got this like steady flow money, that if they want to access. So, and then they all have good yields, right? So again, talking about what I mentioned earlier with like Fortis and with Telus, I love the transparent guidance. So I like Brookfield Infrastructure and Brookfield Renewable, BEP and BIP. They aim for 5 to 9% distribution growth over the long term, right? So it's like just knowing that you're probably getting a raise every year, assuming they can meet their mandate, on already getting a high yield. I think it's a sweet spot. So to answer your question, I'd say something like 50-50. That could fluctuate, obviously, depending which index is doing better,
Yeah,
but
for sure.
something like that. I don't really have a goal with that. I guess my goal over the long term probably would have more money coming from on the Canadian side. But I live right on the border to the U.S., so I haven't been over because of the pandemic. But it's a regular thing for people in my area to, cross the border, and there's a casino there.
Just
There's
just
just
drive over
drive
the
over the
bridge.
bridge. Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. So like, I think when I think about like Messina, New York, like to me that's closer in my mind than like Morrisburg or something like that. It's like just it's just across the bridge, and so having some.
And Morrisburg is not that far away from Cornwall for people who
No,
don't
no,
know.
exactly. It's like, half an hour away, not even, but I can get to Messina, faster across the bridge and whatever. So, so when I think about like having my income split up, I think long term, I like the concept of having some U.S. dollars coming in, because then that's foreign exchange protection for me, right? Because the U.S. dollar is so much higher right now. If I wanted to go spend $100 in the U.S., it's like, okay, well, now I'm down to 70 or something like that, whatever it is, right? But if I have dividends coming in on
Yeah.
like U.S. dollars, well, great, I can just withdraw that, and I could use that. Right now I'm reinvesting it, obviously, but in the future I could just cash that out in US dollars, and I don't have to worry about FX.
Yeah. One final
Yep.
quick question. How many individual stocks do you have in your
Too many.
portfolio?
Too many.
Are you
Yeah, probably around 40.
you're one of
Yeah, I'm
those
one of those
guys?
guys. Probably around 40. Could be somewhere between 40 to 50, something like that. Most of them are dividend paying.
And then plus any ETFs on top of that,
I
or
do not have ETFs. I'm trying to think. No, I don't have any ETFs. It's all individual companies that I have. So probably 40 to 50. And that wasn't always the plan. It's just I have a hard time when I see a company I really like not to just buy some. Right.
I I know that feeling. You're like, "Oh, I
Yeah,
want some."
exactly.
And then you realize, "Oh, I might have too many in my portfolio because maybe I should just be focusing on stacking what
Yeah,
I already
yeah, and I
have."
and I have no intention of consolidating. So I'm kind of like the from the Warren Buffett school of like you only get a certain number of punch cards in your life. Yeah, punches on the punch card. So like if you're buying stocks, I always think of it like this: you should be thinking to buy to sell no worse than like a 10-to-1 ratio. And for me, it's way more than that. I call it being like a net accumulator of assets. Like over the long term, you want to be buying way more than you're selling. So if you can do that, you'll probably do pretty well. Even without kind of talking about specifically what you're buying, you want to be accumulating assets, not selling them. And so, like, I can put it this way: I've never sold a company just because I was like, oh, I want to churn my portfolio. Like, I think I think
Right.
TD is going to do better than Bank of Nova Scotia next year. That's like literally not even in my mind. I wouldn't even consider it. Selling has just been usually out of necessity or whatever. Like when Jean Coutu was being purchased by Metro, I sold my Jean Coutu at that point, and then I bought some Metro, and I put the rest of the money I think into like AbbVie, the pharmaceutical. So yeah, well 40
Mhm.
to 50 stocks, and I probably won't consolidate that. Number will probably like keep growing. I hope it doesn't grow too much. And my focus at this point is like keep buying more of what I already own. Like identify the good
Yeah.
ones, put more money into the good ones, like Charlie Munger would say, and that's the focus. That's the goal.
Yeah, I'm sort of in that 20 to 25 range, and I kinda wanna keep it there, but at the same time, there's a few more that I would like to add, and I'm like, "Okay, I'm at some point, I probably will add them, but Dave, keep it under 30, man." I just keep telling myself, "Keep it under 30."
Yeah, no. Well, so it's funny because when you a lot of the different guys you'll read, they'll say like if you have 10 to 12 stocks, you've got sufficient diversification. Any more than that, you're just diluting your portfolio. But then I also look at something like a Silicon Valley Bank and I say, what if that were to happen tomorrow with like TD Bank or something? Yeah, you don't want to have,
Which
which
it's
is not
not
going
going
to.
to the TD or any of the
Completely,
Canadian
yeah,
banks,
completely
but
different story altogether. But like imagine, right? Or like a Nortel or something like that. That like if I was investing at the time that Nortel was around, I probably would have had some Nortel. You know what I mean? Like
guaranteed we would have had back in the
yeah,
'90s, who like,
yeah,
every Canadian that was investing had
yep.
Nortel in the
I
'90s,
would have had it, and
guaranteed.
I would have lost my money.
It was the
Yeah,
darling. It was, like,
yeah.
everybody.
Yeah. So yeah, look at a situation like that, and it's like you would have been blindsided. I would have been blindsided. And so, yeah,
Everyone
exactly.
was.
Well,
Everyone
I was
was.
talking to a guy one day, and he was telling me that his pension is from Nortel, and he was telling me it was get cut by 50%. And I don't know if it's gotten worse since then, but like just
Yikes.
imagine your pension was your only source of income, right? And you had it in a company, a stable company like that. You thought you were set for life, and you retired, and you had no dividend income, and you had no other portfolio income or something like that, right? That's again the benefit when I think about dividend growth investing is it's like you're building your own pension. And when you're talking about whether it's 20 or 50 stocks that you've got it, or maybe you have a few ETFs that have a collection of 100 stocks or whatever, 200 stocks. That's what it's all about. It's like if you have a pension from work, great. If you have other sources of income, awesome.
Yeah.
But having that portfolio income gives you that little extra sleep at night. That who doesn't want that, right?
Yeah, I agree. So I see we're already coming up quickly on an
Yeah.
hour. This has been
Yeah.
an yeah, another incredible, amazing, absolutely 100% great conversation here on the Passive Income Podcast. I've loved talking to you. Any final thoughts before we sign off?
No, I think what the main thing I would say is, I guess my overall philosophy, and I'd recommend this to anyone, is just, spend less than you make and invest the difference, right? So that's kind of like my number one piece of financial advice. Anyone asks me, how can I be successful financially? What can I do? It's like, very simple. It's like income and expenses, right? Spend less than you make and invest the difference. Be a net accumulator of assets, right? Buy way more than you sell. And if you can do those two things, you don't need to be too smart. You don't need to don't overthink it. It's like if you can do those two things, you're going to be okay. And
Right.
and I would say that whether it doesn't matter what's happening in the world with finance, don't watch the headlines every day, right?
Oh,
Don't get
no.
too caught up in that, because that's just a vicious cycle. And
Yeah.
then yeah, just in general, thanks, Dave. I appreciate this. This was a really fun opportunity to be on the podcast. So I was pretty excited when
Yeah, I appreciate
yeah, when
having
you
you.
asked on Twitter there, I was pretty excited to jump on with you and have a chat. And like I said, it's just been a conversation rather than an interview. And it's been a
That's the way I like to
yeah, no,
keep
it's been
it.
a joy. So thanks, and happy to join any other time, and so on and so forth. So yeah, thank you.
Cool, cool, cool. So yeah, link in the description below for the Get Rich Brothers website, and obviously for buy investing shirts and buy me a coffee. So check out any of those links in the description below. If you're still here, you've spent an hour of your time with us. So hit that subscribe button. Those are the rules. You're still here an hour later. Subscribe.
Yeah.